Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for the Weekly Reader 4. This is the 5th week we've been doing this, but I skipped a week because I am ultimately lazy and without worth or merit. But this is just sort of a wrap-up of the things that I have read this week, some things that I thought would be worth talking about in a video such as this. And the number one thing is I posted to Patreon a poem called Weekend Getaway, which is another poem sort of about how stupid it is to be me. And I didn't realize how many of those poems that I write, that I have written, that I will probably continue to write until recently, posting most of them, many of them, on Patreon. So I'm going to need to get an editor, probably, to talk me out of this and how awful it is, how stupid it is to write the same poem over and over again. Do I need to move this? Is this bugging anyone else? I don't know what's going on here. I'm not a photographer. I don't have an eye for these sorts of things. I'm not a visual artist of any medium, though I used to draw. That's mine. Can you see that? That's Kurt Vonnegut. Those two are mine. That's not mine. That was Alexis Carr. That's my older brother. And that is Alexis Carr as well. It's a strange detour for this video. But yeah, so on Patreon, basically what I'm doing is any patron of any level gets to see I post 2 pieces of writing per month in some form or stage of draft. So if you're ever interested in my writing, that's sort of one place that they can be found. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing over there. Small side note that has nothing to do with this channel or with reading, besides the art stuff. I posted a 150 subscriber Q&A announcement both on this channel and my personal channel. I will link a comment to my personal channel in the comments section below, and you are more than welcome to come over there and ask a question in the comments section of either of those videos, as I released an announcement video on that channel for that video as well. Gotten some pretty good questions so far, even though I specifically said it's not the book channel. Don't ask me book questions, because then I'll have nothing to answer when I do a Q&A on the book channel. And everyone asks book questions. That's all you want from me. That's all I'm good for. That's fine. I'll answer them, you sons of bitches. I'm a little upset. I thought I was more than that to you. Apparently I am learning I am not. I'm going to calm down now. Yeah, I'm going to have to do this so I can see my timer. I got my phone flipped the wrong way. Hopefully it doesn't post upside down. I know nothing about electronics. I finished and posted Chapter 7 of Absalom. What a meaty chapter that was. What an experience. This novel has been... So, every novel reading experience provides its own little getaway, right? And this is one of the struggles when you do something academically, like when you pursue an English literature degree, for example, is that you basically just have to read on a schedule. You can't just dive into anything because you got so much to do. That is also one of the struggles that I have faced with this channel. Why is it doing that? Is one of the struggles that I have faced with this channel is that the reading experiences are condensed or hurried, depending on how the novel presents itself. So, for example, when I read A Farewell to Arms, Es Brutal, on my own, I sort of picked it up at leisure and set it down at leisure, etc., etc. In my memory, I have no idea how long it took me to read. But something like, what's something I've read for the channel here? San Miguel by T.C. Boyle. I know how long it took me to read that. It took me a week because I had to, because I was posting a review in a week. For this, the style that I'm doing on the channel now, where I break the books down into chapters or series of chapters, things like that, into a read along and then a review, it scurries about the reading in its own sort of way. It is I'm not going to say it is a bad thing, but it's certainly dictated, right? And being a contrarian, even if it's me telling me what to do, I don't like to do it. So that's not true. I'm not a contrarian. Don't say that. But the experience thus far with, so I'm trying to think how to say it. I have really profited a lot as a reader, as a writer, as I think, because of the things that he talks about as a human being, from reading Absalom. That said, if I wasn't doing this live on the channel, I don't know that I would have gotten through so much of it. I might have DNF'd it, attributing it to the fact that I don't have the tools. And I think largely that's true. I feel at times in these videos that I'm letting down everyone who's reading along because I don't know that I'm providing anything for the read along. I hope that everyone who is reading along is getting something out of it for themselves. And boy, are there some gorgeous quotes. But at times, I just really feel like this book is kicking my ass. Beyond that, on a whim, I sort of picked up Stardust by Neil Gaiman, just to sort of read through it, just on a whim. And that's fitting because it is, thus far, very whimsical. I think that is what I'm going to post on the channel as a read-along following the wrap-up of The Shining. So it'll be interesting. It's this is my first full-fledged attempt at Neil Gaiman. I had a roommate who had many of his books, but I think he just sort of liked the idea of Neil Gaiman more than he liked Neil Gaiman. Because he had, the first one he attempted to read was American Gods. It took him about 6 months, and he hated every page of it by his own recount. The experience I'm having thus far with Neil Gaiman is confounding. It is painful how fucking British this guy is, first off. If you didn't know as much, J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter might come across as having been written to be whimsical, having been written in order that the prose might sort of lull a younger person along. And I don't mean this. I know my reputation with Harry Potter and the series on the channel. I don't mean this as demeaning. I don't mean this as insulting of the literature. What I mean it as is it reads as if it were written to be fancy to a kid. It reads as if there are these beats of fanciful prose, then you get slapped in the face with something that's just sort of silly, right? Something that there's all this magic going on and all of a sudden Harry Potter sneezes. Something like that. Stardust is, thus far, see if I can probably just open it up to anything in here. I'll just do first paragraph of page 3. The town of Wall stands today as it had stood for 600 years, on a high jut of granite amidst a small forest woodland. The houses of Wall are square and old, built of gray stone, with a dark slate roof and high chimneys, taking advantage of every square inch of space on the rock. The houses lean into each other and are built one upon the next, with here and there a bush or tree growing out of the side of a building. That is, right there, just about as declarative a paragraph as you're going to find in this entire first chapter. Most of the first chapter, is so British. The only way I can describe it is this descriptly nondescript, in that if you describe everything, essentially what you're describing is nothing. There is one paragraph I'm thinking of in specific where he's talking about the village of Wall has all these visitors, and he goes on to describe them. And basically, he describes every type of person that there could ever be. So if you describe specifically every type of person there could ever possibly be, what the fuck is the point? What's the point in describing it all? Just say all these people come. Where is it? Give me just 1 second. I apologize. I should have done this beforehand, but I wasn't expecting to get onto this rant. Here. Describing the main character. He had nut brown hair and nut brown eyes and nut brown freckles. Okay, so you've told us nothing, which to an extent is the point. This main character is supposed to be fairly nondescript, but you go on, he was middling tall and slow of speech. He had an easy smile which illuminated his face from within, and he dreamed, when he daydreamed in his father's meadow, of leaving the village of Wall and all its unpredictable charm, and going to London or Edinburgh or Dublin, because any of the places that a young man would dream to go are in the UK, I guess. But it's just so I'm gonna do my I think that it's going to provide Stardust, the novel, is going to provide the opportunity for some pretty good discussions, but it's just so boring to some extent. Beyond that, I shot my video for If You Were Coming in the Fall. And basically anytime I go to Emily Dickinson, at this point in my life, I've been going for a poem that I already know. But I always stay for a little of the unexpected. And I happened across a poem this time that I hadn't ever read, and it reads as such. It is poem 1168, as it happens on page 520 of the complete Emily Dickinson. And it reads as such. As old as woe, how old is that? Some 18,000 years. As old as bliss, how old is that? They are of equal years. Together chiefest they are found, but seldom side by side. From neither of them, though he try, can human nature hide. Sort of a quaint little poem. But one of the greatest things about Emily Dickinson is that the quainter the poem, if you dig and 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 you dig, you realize that there really is no bottom. There's no bottom to it. You can just dig as far as you want. You can dig as far as you can go. You can dig as deep as there is to dig in your tiny little arms. And just sort of thinking about it, it reminded me of a phrase that I have heard before. And we're going for this to go to literary and thematic terms. Page 89. The term is dissociation of sensibility. And the definition is as such. A phrase coined by T.S. Eliot to describe the separation of feeling and thought. According to Eliot, prior to the middle of the 17th century, poets exhibited a capacity to easily integrate feeling and thought. This was particularly true of metaphysical poetry. The Metaphysicals had been criticized for yoking together wildly divergent images in their poems, as when John Donne compared two separated lovers to the twin legs of a compass in his poem The Anniversary. But Eliot argued that this reconciling of opposites, in this case love and science, was a characteristic of poetry and indicative of the poetic sensibility. Quote, "The ordinary man's experience is fragmentary. The latter falls in love or reads Spinoza, and these two experiences have nothing to do with each other or with the noise of the typewriter or the smell of cooking. In the mind of the poet, these experiences are always forming new wholes." WHOLES. Don't get funny. For Eliot, the metaphysicals were the last group to exhibit a consistently unified sensibility. Since their time, the impact of scientific rationalism had created a division between thought, truth, and feeling, poetry, resulting in the assignment of literature to the emotional, non-rational sphere of human existence. Eliot's thesis was adopted by many adherents of the new criticism, among whom it enjoyed unusual authority. In recent years, it has been seen more as a special pleading on Eliot's part, an example of his desire to turn the clock back to a time before the mid-17th century. Basically saying that, of course Eliot thought that because he thought all things before now, being then, were better. And he was sort of a fuddy-duddy in that fashion. But it brings up the question because, so what was a metaphysical poet? The metaphysical poetry is in this same dictionary described as such. On page 193, metaphysical poetry, a type of 17th century English poetry characterized by witty, ingenious metaphors drawn from widely disparate areas of life, an intellectually challenging mode of argument reminiscent of the fine distinctions of scholastic philosophy, and a forceful colloquial style, as in the opening line from a poem by John Donne, "For God's sake, hold your tongues and let me love." Donne was the first and preeminent metaphysical poet. Later followers included George Herbert, Henry Vaughan, Andrew Marvell, Richard Crenshaw, and Abraham Cowley, and Thomas Traherne. The metaphysicals primarily focused on two subjects, romantic love and religious faith, sometimes treating the one in terms of the other, as in Donne's The Canonization, in which two lovers are treated as saints. The distinctive feature of this poetry is the wit in the 17th century sense of the term, a balancing of strong feeling and intellectual play. Later in the century, the metaphysicals fell out of fashion and remained so until the beginning of the 20th century. Is that so? Among their most important modern supporters was T.S. Eliot, who proclaimed these poets' capacity to integrate such seeming opposites as sexual love and science. He saw in them examples of the unified sensibility sorely lacking in later literature. See dissociation of sensibility. Eliot's praise, along with his compatibility with the principles of new criticism, sparked an enthusiasm for metaphysical poetry in the 1940s and 50s that now appears to have been an overestimation. One recent critique from the basis of Margaret Edson's Pulitzer Prize-winning Wit, 1998, a drama about an English professor dying of cancer and having devoted her life to poetry of Donne. Confronting death, she discovered that neither in poetry nor in life is wit the supreme value she had assumed it to be. I think that is a bit short-sighted, but one, we're always talking about with metaphysical poets the 17th century. Two, whenever we mention metaphysical poets, we're talking about T.S. Eliot. But three, when is the resurgence that is cited here of metaphysical poetry? The resurgence of metaphysical poetry is cited of in the 1940s and 50s. Anyone who loves Emily Dickinson should go and see when the resurgence of Emily Dickinson happened. It coincided with this Let me see real quick what the time is. Okay, we've got time. So the question is begged by number 1 and number 2 points there. The 17th century and T.S. Eliot. 1, did T.S. Eliot rediscover, as the Enlightenment philosophers rediscovered the classic philosophers? Did he rediscover these metaphysical poets? No, they've always been there. They were always influencing other poets. But T.S. Eliot gained himself a platform and was therefore listened to. But the next question, did the metaphysical poetic part of the universe evaporate on January 1st, 1701? No. No. That wit and witticism and those forms of argument were still there. Plus, this cites John Donne as the initial metaphysical poet. I'm not sure that's the case. I think that, as with many disciplines of creativity in the Western world, the stadium in which the metaphysical poets play their poetry was built by William Shakespeare. Look at the ideas that he compares and contrasts in his poetry. Look at the disparate facets of life from which he draws inspiration, from which he draws characters, from which he draws experiences. And you can't tell me that William Shakespeare was not a metaphysical poet. William Shakespeare was, I believe, born the decade prior to John Donne, and John Donne outlived him by a couple decades. So they were contemporaries. So is it prime or necessary or even necessarily possible to say that John Donne was the initial metaphysical poet? There's no way he didn't know about Shakespeare. And there's no way, at least I don't know this. So I'm just going to throw this out there. I would be willing to wager that Shakespeare probably read Donne as well. I think that there was also a zeitgeist at times. This sort of stuff popped up and was popular because of XYZ. An easy example of this is right now in Hollywood. Everyone wants to make superhero movies. Back then, everyone wanted to be really witty. Back then, everyone wanted to be really creative and witty in this type of fashion. That doesn't die. 50 years from now, when Iron Man is seen as cliche and Batman is seen as trashy, and all of the movies are remembered as if they may as well have been the Adam West run on Batman. And don't talk to me about Adam West being superior to the Christopher Nolan movies. Don't start it. Even then, there will still be people taking the superhero movie genre seriously and doing it well. Metaphysical poetry never died. Emily Dickinson is a metaphysical poet. So if metaphysical poetry is played in the arena that Shakespeare built, the ball was inflated by John Donne. And there's a lot of people on that field. I think I want to read a John Donne poem just to sort of make a point here. On page 80 of the Penguin Classic, The Complete English Poems, John Donne, we get The Sun Rising. Busy old fool, unruly sun, why dost thou thus through windows and through curtains call on us? Must to thy motions lovers' seasons run? Saucy pedantic wretch, go chide late schoolboys, or and sour princesses. Go tell court huntsmen that the king will ride. Call country ants to harvest offices. Love, alike, all alike, no season knows, nor clime, nor hours, days, months, which are the rags of time. Thy beams, so reverend and strong, why shouldst thou think I could eclipse a cloud, them with a wink? But I think I would not lose her sight so long. If her eyes have not blinded thine, look, and tomorrow late tell me, whether both the Indias of spice and mine be where thou left'st them, or lie here with me. Ask for those kings whom thou saw'st yesterday, and thou shalt bear all here in one bed lay. She is all states and all princes. I, nothing else, is. Princes do but play us, compared to this. All honors mimic, all wealth alchemy. Thou, son, art half as happy as we. In the worlds contracted thus, thine age seeks ease, and since thy duties be to warm the world that done is warming us, shine here to us, and thou art everywhere. This bed thy center is, these walls thy sphere. Take out all of the dosts and thous and thines. Would that poem from John Donne not fit beautifully into a collection by Emily Dickinson? So I think a lot of what's going on there when you're talking about the metaphysical poets, part of it is I've sort of talked a few times on the channel about there feels to be two well springs of poetry. One which is very sort of bling bling, look at me, which is metaphysical, which is Shakespeare, which is T.S. Eliot to an extent. But T.S. Eliot is sort of the bridge to the other wellspring, which is very naked and very stripped down, very Richard Sykin, very Charles Bukowski, very Sylvia Plath. The Bukowski and Sykin and Plath type of poetry beg you to look away from them almost. Whereas John Donne, Emily Dickinson, William Shakespeare, they dare you not to look at them. And I think that it's sort of strange because the metaphysical type of poetry is very much driven almost by a little bit of assholishness. You don't think that I can put sex and religion in the same poem and get away with it? Watch me. Watch me. When you take a poem like The Flea and you put it into the context and time in which it was written, those would have been some dangerous words. But that is all I have for this week. It really helps me out on the channel if you hit the like video. If you are here and you have not subscribed, do so. This is a weekly feature here on the channel that I'm trying to get up and going strong. Be sure that you check the comments section below for a link to my personal channel. Go over there and subscribe, where I'll talk about movies and nonfiction and finances and things like that. And be sure to leave a question on one of the 150 subscriber announcement videos because it's fun to answer them for me. So I hope to see you next week for this feature.